If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
And warmer from below, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Craig Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you guys. Joining me in segment number 2, we're going to have aboard Rocco Miller. He does such a great job over at his website, bracketeer.org, and he actually helps out a lot of these coaches and a lot of these programs set up their non-conference schedules, and that has popped up quite a bit because we remember the comments that were made a few weeks ago by Clemson's Brad Brownell well before the NCAA tournament, so this is not like some sort of revisionist history or anything like that, calling out the Big 12 for not necessarily playing the toughest competition, while his team in Clemson and other ACC schools, they buffed up their non-conference schedules, they played against tougher teams, and lo and behold, the ACC has had a nice season thus far. So we're going to chat with them about how much these non-conference games, how much these just games that we have in November/December do prepare these teams for the NCAA tournament, how it should be weighted in general, and how he just evaluates the entire field right now, and if any team can take down UConn, because my goodness gracious, that team is an absolute bulldozer. In the final segment, I'm going to get you guys picks and analysis on both E-League 8 games for this Easter Sunday. And by the way, happy Easter to all as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we have fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I know that a lot of you guys have been asking about coaching moves, what have you. That's actually something that we are going to be talking about with our good friend Rocco Miller in a few minutes, as it has been a very interesting offseason to say the least. There have been a lot of good quality hires that have been made, so we're going to be chatting about that and so much more. And how about if we take a look back at the 2 Elite 8 games that we did get on Saturday, try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Well, my DK Network right a pick I feel very salty about because Clemson had a double-figure lead in this game against Alabama. They were in very good shape, and Clemson, one of the best free throw shooting teams in all of college basketball, missed a lot of front ends. They go 8 of 16 at the free throw line in Alabama. They win. They cover by a count of 89-82. And for Clemson, the man that was really keeping them afloat in this game, Joe Girard, he hit some nice shots late, goes 5 of 10 from three-point range, 19 points, and Clemson won the turnover battle in this one, 12-8, actually 13-8 though. They did lose a rebound battle, 44-33. Alabama was clearly the better team on the glass, and the guy that came up very strong in this one, Nick Pringle, 16 points, 11 rebounds, was able to give the team 3 assists, and just the ball movement in general for Alabama was good. 20 assists on their 29 made buckets, but did have Ian Shefflin chip in there, 18 points, 11 rebounds, and for Alabama, they advance in this round because they go 16 of 36 from three-point range. Mark Sears, he went 7 of 14 from the outside, so we shall see if they're going to be able to duplicate that against a big bad UConn, who completely took it to Illinois. 77-52 was the final in this one. UConn has now won 10 NCAA tournament games last 2 seasons, and every one of those wins has been by at least 13 points for Illinois. They went 50 real-time minutes in which they did not score a single point. This was a game that was tied 23-23 with a few minutes remaining in the first half. I think that was about like 3:30 or so. They were down 23-23. You're looking at a game where it's like, all right, this is going to be an actual battle. And then from there, things go completely down the toilet bowl as UConn puts together a 30-0 run. Yeah, that was very, very rough to say the least. And for Illinois, they keep continuing to just go at Donovan Clingan, and they had no success. According to ESPN Stats and Info, in shots that were contested by Donovan Clingan, Illinois went 0 of 19 on those shots as Donovan Clingan, giant of the earth, 22 points, 10 rebounds, 5 blocks, and by far the best player out there on the floor. Tristan Newton had 5 points and 5 assists in this game, and UConn still won by 25 points. Cam Spencer chipped in their 12 boards, 5 assists, 11 points for UConn. They did a nice quality job winning that battle on the glass 45-36, and they actually lost the turnover battle 9-8 as Illinois didn't really turn it over, but needed more than 8 points out of Jaron Shannon, who went 2 of 12 from the floor, and just nothing doing for this Illinois team. They had 17 made buckets, and they had 10 blocked shots from UConn, so that was not great. And what we saw on Saturday was the fact that you got 2 favorites to be able to come in, win, and cover. You saw 1 over and 1 under, and if you're just taking a look at what we've gotten overall this season in college basketball, it has been a very favorite-heavy season, as favorites are still hitting at about 50.7% against the spread, 2,848, 2,768, and 100 against the spread. Meanwhile, overs hitting at 50.9%, 2,876 to 2,774, with many pushes along the way. And if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, this involves all tournaments, NCAA tournament, NIT, what have you. It's actually been a little bit underwhelming, 24 unders to just 16 overs, with favorites going 20-20 against the spread in that span. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Saturday. Coming up next, how about if we talk about some of these coaching moves that we have been seeing? Let's take a look at the Elite 8 games that we are going to be getting, and let's just dive in general as to how much we're able to make from some of these teams that they did challenge themselves in the non-conference portion, as we do have quite a few rematches that happened in this round. That's up next right here on Coach Good Seats with myself, Greg Peters, and now a part of the Beast Family Podcast. We're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coach Soups with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast, and it is always great to be joined by this man as Rocco Miller. He does a tremendous job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love over at Bracketeer.org. Does an amazing job with his bracketology, but on top of that, so much of what we're seeing right now is a product of what he helps out with in terms of the offseason, helping out the scheduling, a lot of these on-conference games, which certainly we're going to talk about that in a minute with one of the teams that we saw on Saturday and so much more. For Rocco Miller, you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at Rocco Miller, the number 8 all together. And Rocco, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
My pleasure as well, Greg. I love coming on with you. You're one of the few that can match my passion. In fact, you can go even more in depth on some teams in the MEAC and the Ohio Valley than I can on a good day, but it's always great to combine thoughts with you. I always come away a little bit smarter.
Yep, and you help enlighten us so much as well, and I do think that it is really interesting what we are getting in terms of Elite 8 and what we all got this week in general, because one of the big storylines a few weeks ago in college basketball, and I'm sure that this struck home with you a little bit, I just still remember prior to the NCAA tournament, Brad Brownell calling out the committee, utilizing the net ranking, saying, hey, the Big 12 has played a lot of cupcakes. Here we are over at Clemson. We played TCU. We played Alabama. Just how big do you think that has been specifically for Clemson, but not just them, but all the teams that we've seen reach a second week of the tournament just play good non-conference competition? Because it really does feel like, and Brad Brownell, he's not a revisionist. He said this before the NCAA tournament. He was pointing out how this prepares teams for March, and it appears as though he was 110% correct on his comments.
Yeah, which makes me wonder what the heck happened in 2023 when Clemson had the 341st ranked schedule, and that's the de facto eliminator of why Clemson was one of the first 4 or so teams out in 2023. I think he had to learn the hard way, and in 2022, Wake Forest had to learn the hard way similarly, and this year it was Pittsburgh. So the ACC has had to learn the hard way and accept their place in college basketball, which I completely understand. I think historically, you got 2 blue bloods. They've had a very deep conference for most of our lifetimes, Greg. But in the last handful of years, with the money shifting, with all the head coaching hires in the SEC, obviously the Big Ten usually sends 8 or more teams to the tournament, and the Big 12 is usually the strongest. ACC's fallen into 4th, sometimes as low as 6th. I think last year even 7th in the overall pecking order. And what that means is you can't just build a resume in your league. You have to go out of the league and play not only a good tournament, but you got to play 3 or 4 of these games. So now ACC in a little bit better spot in the future because they've got that SEC challenge, which is exactly where we saw Clemson, Alabama last time. It's because of that ACC-SEC challenge. But Clemson, I thought, was very deliberate about their schedule. Dick Bender's on their staff over there. He does a great job with the schedule. Got them to play TCU up in Canada. They played a number of big games. They had Memphis as well on the road, a game they lost, but I thought that game really helped them. A game with Boise State, and they're actually next year going to go to Boise State. I don't see any teams from East Coast power schools going to Boise State. So Clemson has really embraced this. As a guy who helps with scheduling, I love to see it. And on Alabama's side, Nate Oates has never wavered. They've had years where they don't even play a single quad 4 game. And the years where they do, they don't plan to. It's only if a team or two in the quad 3 range falls apart and ends up in quad 4. I think what you're looking at here, it's something it almost makes me want to shed a tear because I try to tell 90% of Power 6 coaches to do what these guys are doing. It falls on deaf ears. It makes me have a lack of passion to help them because it's like, I don't want to go give you the Lindenwood phone number or the Prairie View phone number or or the Texas A&M Commerce phone number because that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this to get teams to build real resumes, and there's a benefit to it, as you said, Greg, so beautifully. The benefit is your team's going to be tougher in March. I was talking to PJ Hall, and PJ was calling out the games they played. He called out the TCU game. He called out the other Alabama game. He called out several games. He's like, we wouldn't have known this about each other or learned these lessons about ourselves or have the interconnectivity and all these extra challenges if we didn't play a hard non-league.
But I think that that's so well said by you, as Rocco Miller does such great work over at Bracketeer.org, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And how much emphasis do you think should be paid on these games that we do see in November/December? Because when it comes to the NCAA tournament, we always turn on the TV. We listen to all these analysts saying, oh, this team is getting hot at the right time. Oh, this team, they come in winning 4 out of their last 5 games. And a lot of people want to write off these games that we saw in things like the Maui Invitational, even though we get a rematch between Gonzaga and Purdue in the Sweet 16. They want to write off these non-conference games. And while you certainly don't want to be going back to November being like, oh, Clemson knocked off Alabama, we're going to see deja vu all over again. We don't want to be going to that sort of extreme. I do think that it matters a lot more than what a lot of people want to give it credit for.
Yeah, and the way the committee's always looked at it, and I think this is where you got to draw the line. The committee looks at it as a game in November is worth the same as a game in early March before they go and do those final meetings before the bracket comes out. Coaches know that. Everybody plays by the same rules here. It's not like all of a sudden in the last minute we're like, oh, sorry, your last 10 are all that matters. Sorry about those other 3 months. It's not how it works. When everybody does their schedule, we're already working on 2025 schedule. In fact, we're ahead of schedule compared to the last couple of years, finally getting away from that COVID era of scheduling. But I think there's still a lot of scheduling left due to the transfer portal. Get into that more potentially. My point is everybody knows how you get bids and how you want to attack your schedule. And I've always said this. I think I've said it on your show before too, Greg. So many of these coaches, I can't blame them. I'm sure if I was in their shoes, I might actually decide to do what they decide to do. But they're so dang concerned about their job security. We see over and over again now, you only get 1 year, you only get 2 years. You know, Kenny Payne was basically gone. He's lucky to survive 2 years, right? A lot of these Big 12, Big 10, you have a big budget to go buy a bunch of games, buy a bunch of wins. Sometimes your athletic director might not be a basketball-focused person. So you could go to your athletic director and say, yeah, we missed the tournament, but we won 21 games, but 11 of those wins were quad 4 and below. The athletic director might not know the difference. There's a lot of different motivations in scheduling. I'm all about don't even do this job if you don't want to get to the tournament, if you don't want to advance in the tournament, because what's the point of being a competitor if you just want to glance around? I mean, there's so much money now. That's the problem. I think some of these guys getting these jobs, they're like, hey, I can go to Louisville. I can get fired after 2 years. I can get a $15 million buyout, whatever it is. I can get paid for 2 years at $3 to $4 million a year. It's like better than any job I'll go find. And I think what you're finding in some of these situations are the lack of competitive fire. That's why I'm so glad the mid-major coaches are being brought up more and more often, because all those guys come from jobs where they had to be fiery. Nate Oates, who I've been talking to all weekend, I'm a perfect example. I started covering him at Buffalo. His track record goes way longer than that.
UW Whitewater with him.
Yeah, exactly. UW Whitewater. There you go, baby. But that's the thing is, like, if you see Nate Oates on the sidelines this weekend in Los Angeles, you can see nothing has changed about him from Wisconsin Whitewater to Alabama trying to get to the Final Four.
Yep, absolutely. It's so nice to see, and it is so good to be seeing these coaches on the come up. And do want to talk a little bit about that as well, because while we've been all enthralled in the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 action, and rightfully so, just so many great players, so many great teams taking the floor this week, we have seen a lot of coaching hires, and I like a lot of them, like Mark Byington going over to Vanderbilt. What he did at James Madison was incredible. Pat Kelsey, him getting the job over at Louisville. Good to see a guy like that getting rewarded. Heck, I know you're out there on the West Coast, Washington and Stanford, two teams that on this podcast I've been critical about for them not making a hire. I like what both teams did, bringing in Danny Sprinkle, bringing in Kyle Smith. I thought that those were two great hires. I'm not sure how you've been evaluating these early coaching hires, but I just look up and down the board and I can't really see one where I'm like, man, that seems like a little bit of a reach. I feel like all these teams that have made hires thus far, they've done a good job.
Yeah, I think so. I'm really curious to see what Kwanzo Martin does at Missouri State in his second go-around. Obviously, he went through the ringer, got all the way up to the top of the sport, and then got fired. Now he's kind of hitting the reset button basically 2 decades later. That's a super interesting one, in my opinion. I agree with you, Greg. On the paper, a lot of these look like really sexy, good hires. Stanford, for them to be able to get Kyle Smith, that was just a perfect fit with his background being at Columbia and also at San Francisco, coming back to the Bay Area. Super excited to be able to be close with Kyle once again. For Washington, where I'm from originally, based on the circumstances, Danny Sprinkle was kind of teed up for weeks, and it finally got done. That's kind of the trend these days with AD hires. You got guys like him and Lutz. Lutz, I believe, will be the Oklahoma State coach. It's not official yet, but it's looking that way. They both have a lot in common. They both took 2 lower majors, Sprinkle at Montana State, Lutz at A&M Corpus Christi, 2 years in a row to the tournament. And then they get to a bigger job, Lutz at WKU, of course, Sprinkle at Utah State, one and done. Boom, tournament again. It's just starting to seem like, for better or for worse, I think mostly for better, if you can get your team to the tournament, there's a really good chance you're moving up, especially if you go 3 in a row like that. The one I'm really curious about, Greg, I don't know your opinion here, but announced Preston Spradlin will be the new coach at James Madison. Great job there, one of the best Sun Belt jobs, potentially the best based on salary and resources and those beautiful facilities they have at JMU. But my question is, now Morehead State's open. There's some rumors already of who's going to get interviewed and all that, but I'm super curious about Morehead State because I think Morehead State's clearly the best job in the Ohio Valley. They were already number 3 in the pecking order. As soon as Belmont and Murray went to the Valley, it's been Morehead's title to lose each year. And I think coaches from bigger leagues recognize that. And based on those examples I just gave you about Sprinkle and Lutz, do not be surprised if a coach from a higher conference comes down and takes the Morehead State job.
Yeah, but I think that that's such a good point as well, because the goal is ultimately to be able to get to the NCAA tournament. And if you're able to get to the NCAA tournament from the Ohio Valley, would you rather want that than, say, be 500 in the Missouri Valley Conference, be a mediocre team out there in the Atlantic 10, something like that? I think that that's something that a lot of coaches have to wrestle with as well. And something that I've noticed over the last few years, we saw it in the NCAA tournament with one of the stars of the NCAA tournament, guys in terms of both players and coaches coming from the D2 level down to the D1 level as well. Like, I take a look at CSUN, the job that Andy Newman did. They were one of the most profitable teams in college basketball this year for myself. I just mentioned Jack Golke, the threes that he made against Kentucky. He went from D2 up to D1. He made that big jump. Do you think we're going to be seeing more of this? And in terms of these coaching hires, do you think that there's going to be more guys that were very good coaches at the D2 level? We've seen it with Josh Schertz in recent years, get a bit more consideration than ever before as well.
I think so, and you've already seen it already in the cycle that we're in. So Mike DeGeorge has been hired at Cal Poly, excellent D2 coach, took Colorado Mesa to the Sweet 16 this year, and I think back-to-back NCAA Division II tournaments. I thought for Cal Poly, based on that being one of the hardest jobs in the league, much like CSUN last year, super strategic angle there to get to George. I like what the Mustangs did. It's about as best you can hope for. And then I think also, if I'm not mistaken, John Schulman over at Central Arkansas, he was hired about a week or two ago. Also a very difficult job. The ASUN is trying to put money into basketball. They lost Liberty. They're going to lose Kennesaw State next year. They're looking for angles to, find some under-the-radar guys. John Schulman did a nice job. I believe it was at Alabama Huntsville Division II. So there's 2 quick examples. You also have Cullum's been the guy, he's been rumored for a couple of years now to land some of these bigger jobs. I believe Oklahoma State looked at interviewing him. I'm wondering what his motivation is. I don't have a personal relationship with him. Missouri State would have made a lot of sense based on the geography. We'll see what Drake does. Maybe that's a place where McCollum could land. Drake's still open right now. And it's not just those three examples. I think we're going to see maybe one or two more. You still got places like Canisius and Cornell interviewing people. You have Detroit Mercy still open. You have USC Upstate still open. And I think as the carousel spins at the top of the sport, like I'm waiting patiently to figure out what USC is going to do. They just hired Jen Cohen, the former Washington athletic director. She's been on the job about 5 months, and boom, she's got a big decision to make. I think it was a mutual breakup with Andy Enfield on his way to SMU. And I think with Jen Cohen, how much does the Bronny/LeBron politics play in? If they want Bronny back, are they going to let Bronny go somewhere else next year? And if Bronny does come back, how much of a say do they have in the next coach? I think it's a pretty big say, quite honestly. And I think whatever USC does, because if USC hires an active coach somewhere else, more dominoes are coming, Greg, and buckle up.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun coaching carousel. It is nice to see these D2 guys get a little bit of a shot, as we are alluding to, these fast risers like Danny Sprinkle and company. Good to see that they're getting the credit that is due to them as well. So there's going to be a lot to come on that front, as Rocco Miller does great work over at Bracketeer.org. Is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And we've talked a lot about what we're seeing in terms of scheduling, in terms of what we're seeing off the court. How about if we talk a little bit about what we've seen on the court? Because coming into the week, in terms of Sweet 16, really, if you want to call NC State a Cinderella, I'll let you have it. But past that, that is the only team ranked outside the top 6 seeds that was able to make it to the Sweet 16. And just what has been your overall thoughts on the NCAA tournament? Because I take a look at things, and while we don't have the Cinderellas, which is a little bit of a bummer, we just have really good on-court play in general. I felt like we saw some great Sweet 16 games, and on top of that, we've got that juggernaut in UConn where, it just becomes such a compelling storyline of them versus the field.
Yeah, nobody looks like they can hang with UConn. San Diego State, I think, matchup-wise, we saw it in the championship game last year. I understand there's a lot of different pieces now. No more Sonogo. Ladie's got a way different role than he had last year. A couple different moving parts personnel-wise. You can even argue UConn's not as deep as they were last year. However, the bottom line is this. They're still running the same schemes. They're running tons of actions each possession. They're freeing guys up. They're getting open looks nearly every time down court. San Diego State is no slouch defensively, as we both know very well. Top 10 defense again this year. They carved them up. I didn't even think UConn played a good first half in that game, and they were still up by 9, I believe, at halftime. End up playing much better in the second half and win by 30. Get out of here. This is a San Diego State team that just demolished a really good Yale team. But you know how the NCAA tournament is. It's all about matchups. That was a beautiful matchup for UConn, but I don't know many teams can match up with them. So probably the team to beat, and they deserve that. I agree with you on the Cinderella's part. It's been tough for me to get through this second weekend, not having like James Madison to root for, or even like a Mountain West team, like a New Mexico or something that we thought might still be alive. That part's been tough for me personally, but being out here in LA, covering these games here, it doesn't really matter where you are. It's still great basketball, and I think we're still going to have some surprises yet to come.
I hope so as well, and we certainly did see a little bit of a surprise, in my opinion, with the way that Clemson was able to handle Arizona. That was a very fun game, to say the least, just the way the ACC in general has been able to perform here in the NCAA tournament. A rise to prominence there, and you, my friend, have been able to do a great job of rising as well, Rocco. You do such a great job over at Bracketeer.org. You do so much work in terms of laying the foundation for what we do see in terms of what we get here in March with all the scheduling, with just paying attention to this great sport all 12 months out of the year. So I want to give you the floor here. Let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm out here in Los Angeles through the end of the weekend. Then I'll be out in Phoenix for Final Four week. Really going to be the launching point for 2025 scheduling. There's been trickles of notes going out, trickles of notes coming in, but that's where I get the opportunity to be around the convention, around hundreds of coaches, tons of information coming in, tons of ideas coming in, which is my favorite part, because you got to think outside the box if you want to change anything in this world. I'm going to have a great time out there. I'll be out there for a whole week. If anybody's going to be in Phoenix, please look me up and say hello. I'm really just there to network with everybody. So love the sport passionately. You can follow me on Twitter at Rocco Miller 8. You can also follow my website, bracketeer.org. Starting in April, we'll hit a reset on all those non-conference schedules because those are all over now. We're going to turn the page to 2025, and all off season, you're going to see a ton of updates from me on tournaments, fields that are coming together, announcements for strategic home and home series, any type of non-conference announcement. I'll be sharing it with the public at Rocco Miller 8 on X/Twitter.
That is absolutely tremendous. And Rocco does such a great job of getting us always prepared for the upcoming season, paying attention to what we get every single step along the way. And have no fear, he is a bracketologist that did not have Virginia in the NCAA tournament very astutely. So he does such a good job taking a look at all these great things in college basketball. And every single time he joins this show, he enlightens us with so much great insight. So big thanks, Rocco, for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Gibbs Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always a pleasure to be joined by one of our good friends. Rocco Miller does such a great job taking a look at this great game of basketball that we all know and love. I know that he got to see some great action yesterday out there in Los Angeles. Every single time he joins the show, he lends such good insights and did so once again today. So big thanks to Rocco for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on both games on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at June_D1. Very easy in terms of the order. We'll go Tennessee versus Purdue and then NC State versus Duke with a pair of Final Four bids on the line. So how about if we get things started with 655, 656, and this will be the DK Network write-up pick. Let's get online with these NCAA tournament write-ups as the NIT, the CBI, the lesser tournaments have been treating us much better than the big tournament as we've got Tennessee going up against Purdue. Total on this game is anywhere between 147.5 to 148, and with Purdue, they're between a 3 to a 3.5 point favorite, and I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Tennessee. I did set them as an underdog of 2 points, so getting 3+, going to be looking at those points, but right up here is going to be on the under. This is a rematch of a game that we saw earlier in the season in the Maui Invitational. Purdue got the job done in that 171 to 67, and I think it would be far-fetched to think that we're going to get the same shooting expose that we saw the first time around. Purdue shot about 35.5% from the floor in that game. Tennessee about 33%, and both teams shot approximately 26.7% from three-point range. So both of these teams were cold, but how much of the defense that we saw in the first game is going to be able to translate? And I think quite a bit. You've got a Tennessee team that does rank 8th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Both of these teams do a relatively solid job of being able to guard the arc, and this is a Tennessee team that doesn't really shoot it well from three-point range when they're away from home. They shoot 32.2% from three-point range in games played away from home. That is 222nd in all of college basketball, but they do a solid job of being able to grab some offensive rebound, 37th in percentage of missed shots away from home that do result in an offensive rebound, so that's going to be a forte of theirs. Now, they have to go against a Purdue team that's one of the best in the country at denying second chances and one of the best rebounding teams in the country because you've got Giant of the Year Zach Edey, a double-double machine, a guy that's able to just completely impact the game. 24.5 points, 12 boards, he gives you multiple blocks. He's been absolutely insane, and for Purdue, they're the opposite of Tennessee in that they shoot it really well from three-point range. They actually are number one in all of college basketball in terms of their three-point shooting percentage at 41%. It does tumble quite a bit when they're away from home, though. This team in West Lafayette, they shoot 45% from three. That's 37.4% in games played away from home, which, 37.4% three-point shooting in games played away from home is still really, really good. Got Braden Smith, who's able to give you double figures, 7.5 assists per game, and he showed that after that injury he suffered in the Big Ten tournament, he's back from it. He's back in full force. That was a tremendous game that he played up against Gonzaga, and you just take a look at this team in Purdue. All but one of their guys that are their top 8 scorers, all but one of them shoot at least 34.5% from three-point range. All but two of them shoot north of 40% from three-point range. So it's really a loaded and balanced effort. That includes Zach Edey, who is 1 of 2 from three-point range. So that's a little bit of a cheapie, but you know what? He's able to do a solid job there. But I do take a look at this spot, and I do think that Tennessee is going to be able to do a solid job of being able to bear down with their defense. They're not like number one in the country in terms of their opponent's three-point shooting percentage, but this is one of the better teams in the nation of being able to lock down and not allow good looks from three-point range. Overall, they are allowing opponents to shoot 31.4% from three-point range. That is 41st in all of college basketball, and I do have the more dominant defense in that Purdue is hovering more in the neighborhood about 60th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And with this Purdue team, they are very solid in terms of being able to guard the arc themselves. 39th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage away from home at 31.4%. And for Tennessee, it's all about can Dalton connect. He's been able to give the team about 21 points per contest, shoots it really well from three-point range himself, but past that, it's a lot of guys that are sort of holes greater than some of its parts pieces, like a Josiah Jordan-James, who gives you 9 points, 5 rebounds per game, Jonas Adu, solid down low with about 7 rebounds per game, Santiago Vescovi, Zakai Ziegler. These are guys that really dole the ball. Ziegler especially, he's been the main facilitator with 6 assists, 2.2 turnovers per contest, and it is a Tennessee team that's been able to elevate their offense in this past season. Like Tennessee, they used to go into these big giant ruts where they wouldn't be able to score for like 6+ minutes, and that was always doomsday for them in the NCAA tournament. Having Connect has been able to help out with that, and it is a Tennessee team that, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they're a rock solid unit. They're a top 45 team in all of college basketball, but I've been noticing as well, Purdue is playing much more slowly. If you look at their last 12 games, as opposed to the first 24 games of the season, they are playing at a rate of about 4.2 possessions per game fewer. They are super good on the glass. Both of these teams are going to do a nice job, in my opinion, of holding the other to one-and-done opportunities. They're both very strong with regards to their interior defense as well, and I do think that that is going to lead to a bit of a lower scoring game. I don't think that we get quite the cold shooting that we got the first time around, but I do think that it's going to be relatively cold. This is a high-pressure spot. If things are tight late, like I expect them to be, teams are going to slow down. So I did set my total at 144. My write-up is on the under. Purdue made them a 2-point favorite, so you're at 3 to 3.5 taking those points. With Tennessee, we wrap things up with 657, 658 on the card. It is Duke, and they play against NC State. That is out there in Dallas, Texas, and Duke is a favorite of anywhere between 6.5 and 7 points. Most books have already moved to 7. Your total on this game, it is 143. I made my number 7. Now, I took the initial opener on this game. This opened between 6 and 6.5. I was figuring that this was going to be a number that moved, and sure enough, it has. With NC State, it's been a remarkable run for them, but I think even the most bullish of NC State fans would admit they got a little bit fortunate with the three-point shooting a few days ago against Marquette, where they just couldn't hit a shot to save their lives, and I don't think that they're going to be so lucky this time around. You've got DJ Horn, who's been tremendous for NC State, 17 points, shoots 41% from 3, and this NC State team does one thing very well, which is a backbone of a lot of winning teams. They don't hurt themselves. They shoot about 73.5% at the free throw line. In terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they're a top 20 team in all of college basketball. They turn the ball over just 9.6 times per game, so while Michael O'Connell doesn't give you a lot of scoring at about 6 points per contest, he makes the shots that he takes. He shoots about 37.5% from distance, and he has become a more assertive scorer as well. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and he's going to give you like a 30 burger or anything like that, but this man has been able to give you 8+ points in all but one of their wins since the beginning part of the ACC tournament, and that has been a big reason why NC State has gotten to this point with the help of O'Connell. You've got Mohamed Diarra, who's able to give you about 8 rebounds per game down low as well, but here's the problem with NC State. Diarra is the only player on the roster that gives you north of 4.3 rebounds per game, and I like Ben Middlebrooks. I like DJ Burns. Burns is a guy that has captured the nation with the way that he's got some smooth moves. He's able to give you 3 assists per contest as a bit of a big man, but I just don't think that they match up very well with Kyle Filipowski. Last time these two teams played in the ACC tournament, NC State got the job done 74-69, but again, Duke shot 5 of 20 from three-point range in that game. NC State shot 7 of 16 from three-point range. If both teams shoot closer to their averages, Duke is able to win that game, and this is an NC State unit that they have been much better at being able to guard the perimeter recently. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They've still had their issues on that front. Overall, 150th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, while you do have a Duke team that they're 62nd in all of college basketball. Their opponents' three-point shooting percentage goes about 32.7% away from home, and much like NC State, they do a nice job protecting the ball themselves. They're a top 30 team in all of college basketball in terms of fewest turnovers committed on a per possession basis. Tyrese Proctor gives you about 11 points per contest, does a nice job giving you about 4.2, 4.3 assists per contest, less than a turnover and a half per game when he's not dealing with court storming situations. Kyle Filipowski has been amazing. Block and a half, 8.5 rebounds, 16.5 points per game, and you've got one of the most lethal three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. You've got Jeremy Roach along with Jared McCain combined to shoot about 42.5% from three-point range between the two of them. They're able to give you about 28 points per contest, so I don't think that NC State is going to be as fortunate as they were the first time around when Duke went just 5 of 20 from three-point range. As a matter of fact, for Duke, overall 13th in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage. That falls off a little bit to 37.1% in games played away from home, but it's still a relatively solid clip, while NC State actually shooting 36.8% from three-point range in a road/neutral court setting. So I do think that they're going to be able to hit a few shots in this game. I did set my total at a 143. This is going to be a game where I want to see a little bit more movement on the total as opposed to what we've got right now. We saw a little bit earlier on when this was first initially posted. This was one that was at 142.5 at circa on the open. Personally, I'm waiting for that to be able to pop back up. I would much rather have a 142.5 over rather than a 143.5 under, as I do think that this is going to be one of those classic games where I set my line at 7, and when a team is down 7 with a minute remaining, they hack some more and try everything humanly possible to get that team to the free throw line. So at a 142.5 or less, I like the over, and with Duke, personally, I already laid it at a 6.5 here at the 7. I would say try to be able to find north of 7 on NC State and try to get this below 7 if at all humanly possible with Duke, and that'll wrap things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to Rocco Miller, who does great work over at Bracketeer.org. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. The other way, that's find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast. I have that 5-star review coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger. Because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.